The day my girlfriend left me, she did it for a very simple reason, because according to her, I had no future. I remember that moment perfectly. It's not one of those things that fade away with time. On the contrary, the more years pass, the clearer it becomes in my mind. We were sitting in a small cafe, one of those places with wooden tables and a huge window facing the street. It was a quiet afternoon, nothing special. People walking by, cars passing, the typical noise of the city. But for me, that moment ended up changing everything. We had been together for almost 4 years. 4 years in which she had supported me when things weren't going well, when I spent entire nights working in front of the computer, when I said I was building something that would work someday. But for her, that someday had already taken too long. She took a sip of coffee, placed the cup back on the table, and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't sadness, it was disappointment. "I can't keep doing this," she said. At first I thought she was talking about some argument we had a few days earlier, something small, but she wasn't. "I need someone who has ambition." Ambition. That word kept echoing in my head for several seconds, because the strange thing was, I did have ambition, a lot of it, but I also had something else, a secret. For almost 2 years, I had been quietly working on a project, a digital platform that I started as an experiment, something that, at first, I wasn't even sure would work. That's why I didn't tell almost anyone about it. Not my friends, not my family, and not even her. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I wanted to avoid exactly what was happening in that moment. The doubt. The feeling that I was wasting my time. Because from the outside, that's exactly what it looked like. While some of our friends were getting stable jobs, buying cars, moving into better apartments, I was spending most of my time at home, with my laptop, programming, testing things, failing again and again. To her, that wasn't ambition. It was stagnation. "I don't want to wake up in 10 years and realize that nothing has changed," she continued. I listened without interrupting her, because deep down, I understood what she was saying. From her point of view, she was right. She saw a 28-year-old guy who didn't have a normal job, who didn't talk about clear plans, and who seemed to live inside his own world. What she didn't see was what was happening behind the scenes. What was happening every night. The meetings with investors, the tests with users, the first signs that something was starting to work. But I decided not to say anything. I didn't try to convince her. I didn't try to explain. I simply nodded. We paid for the coffee, we stood up, and we walked out the door. 4 years ended in less than 15 minutes. And just like that, without drama, without shouting, without tears, she disappeared from my life. The first few days felt strange. I won't lie. When you've spent years sharing your life with someone, the silence feels unusual. But something unexpected also happened. I had more time, more focus, more energy to dedicate to what I was building. And during the following 6 months, I worked harder than I ever had in my life. Literally. I slept 4 or 5 hours a day. There were days when I didn't even leave the house. But the project began to grow. At first slowly, then faster. Users started multiplying. Metrics that once seemed impossible started being reached, and then something happened that I had never planned. A large company became interested in what we had created. At first I thought they just wanted to collaborate, but after several meetings, they made an offer. An offer that left me completely speechless. They wanted to buy the company for 38 million euros. I remember staring at the number several times, thinking I had read it wrong, but I hadn't. It was real. Months later, the deal was finalized, and suddenly I went from being the guy who had no future to someone who was financially free. But the most interesting part of this story isn't that. It's not the money, not the company, not even the fact that everything worked out. The most interesting part happened a year later. One night, I was having dinner with some friends at a restaurant. Nothing special. We were talking, laughing, when I heard a voice behind me. "Is that you?" I turned around, and there she was, my ex-girlfriend. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. She looked surprised, but also nervous. We sat down to talk. She told me she had seen a news article about the sale of the company. At first, she wasn't sure it was me, but then she saw the photo, and she knew. "I didn't know you were doing all that," she said. I nodded. Not many people did. She played with her glass of water, staring down at the table. Finally, she said something she had probably been thinking since she arrived. "I guess I made a mistake." I looked at her for a few seconds, and in that moment, I understood something important. For a long time, I had thought that day in the cafe was one of the worst moments of my life. But the truth was, it had been one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it forced me to move forward without depending on anyone else's belief in me. I smiled slightly. "No," I said. "It wasn't a mistake. It was exactly what needed to happen." We said goodbye shortly after, and as I walked home, I thought about how strange time can be. Sometimes people leave your life thinking you're worth nothing, without realizing they were only seeing you before everything began.
It was a stormy night when Alex received the first message from an unknown number. "I see you." He laughed at first. A prank. That's all it could be. But the next message made him stop. "I know what you did today." His stomach turned. "How could? Anyone know that?" He checked every door and window. Everything was locked. Everything was normal. Then came the scratching, soft like nails on wood, from the walls, from the attic. "Stop looking. I'm closer than you think." The storm pounded the windows. Lightning lit the room. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. His phone buzzed again. Details. Secrets, things only he knew. Footsteps, upstairs, slow, deliberate. Alex grabbed a flashlight. Heart racing. Step by step, he climbed. The attic door was slightly open. Dust, boxes, nothing. Relief was short. "Another message, you're lying. I'm already here." He ran downstairs. Locked himself in the bedroom. Tried to call the police. No signal. Then he heard it. Breathing. Inside the room, not the storm, not him. Lightning flashed. A shadow in the corner. Watching, waiting. "Why are you afraid?" "I've been waiting." Alex stumbled. Doors opened on their own. Windows rattled violently. A message again. "It's never too late." He found a hidden panel. Inside. An old diary. Someone had been watching the tenant for months, learning, waiting. The final entry. "If you see this, it's too late." The shadow moved closer. He froze, lamp falling from his hands, lightning. A face appeared. Familiar, wrong, then darkness.